Stop motion is an animation technique to make a physically manipulated object appear to move on its own. The object is moved in small increments between individually photographed frames, creating the illusion of movement when the series of frames is played as a continuous sequence. Dolls with movable joints or clay figures are often used in stop motion for their ease of repositioning. Stop motion animation using plasticine is called clay animation or clay-mation. Not all stop motion requires figures or models. Many stop motion films can involve using humans, household appliances and other things for comedic effect. Stop motion using objects is sometimes referred to as object animation. Terminology: the term stop motion, related to the animation technique, is often spelled with a hyphen, stop motion. Both orthographical variants, with and without the hyphen, are correct, but the hyphenated one has, in addition, a second meaning, not related to animation or cinema, a device for automatically stopping a machine or engine when something has gone wrong. Stop motion is often confused with the time-lapse technique, where still photographs of a live surrounding are taken at regular intervals and combined into a continuous film. Time-lapse is a technique whereby the frequency at which film frames are captured is much lower than that used to view the sequence. When played at normal speed, time appears to be moving faster and thus lapsing. History: stop-motion animation has a long history in film. It was often used to show objects moving as if by magic. The first instance of the stop-motion technique can be credited to Albert E. Smith and J. Stuart Blackton for Vitagraph's The Humpty Dumpty Circus, in which a toy circus of acrobats and animals comes to life. In 1902, a film Fun in a Bakery Shop used the stop trick technique in the lightning sculpting sequence. French trick film maestro Georges Marc copyright Lear S. used stop-motion animation once to produce moving title card letters in one of his short films, and a number of his special effects are based on stop-motion photography. In 1907, The Haunted Hotel is a new stop-motion film by J. Stuart Blackton, and was a resounding success when released. Segundo de Chomacu Den, from Spain, released El Hotel y la copyright CTRICO later that same year, and used similar techniques as the Blackton film. In 1908, A Sculptor's Welsh Rarebit Nightmare was released, as was The Sculptor's Nightmare, a film by Billy Bitzer. Italian animator Roma copyright Bassetti impressed audiences with his object animation tour de force, the automatic moving company in 1912. The great European stop-motion pioneer was Ladislaus Sterwijk, who animated The Beautiful Lou Canada, The Battle of the Stag Beetles, The Ant and the Grasshopper. One of the earliest clay animation films was Modeling Extraordinary, which dazzled audiences in 1912. December 1916 brought the first of Willie Hopkins' 54 episodes of Miracles in Mud to the big screen. Also in December 1916, the first woman animator, Helena Smith Dayton, began experimenting with clay stop-motion. She would release her first film in 1917, an adaptation of William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. In the turn of the century, there was another well-known animator known as Willis O'Brien. His work on The Lost World is well known, but he is most admired for his work on King Kong, a milestone of his films made possible by stop-motion animation. O'Brien's protege and eventual successor in Hollywood was Ray Harryhausen. After learning under O'Brien on the film Mighty Joe Young, Harryhausen would go on to create the effects for a string of successful and memorable films over the next 3 decades. These included It Came from Beneath the Sea, Jason and the Argonauts, The Golden Voyage of Sinbad and Clash of the Titans. In a 1940 promotional film, Autolite, an automotive parts supplier, featured stop-motion animation of its products marching past Autolite factories to the tune of Franz Schubert's Military March. An abbreviated version of this sequence was later used in television ads for Autolite, especially those on the 1950s CBS program Suspense, which Autolite sponsored. 1960s and 1970s. In the 1960s and 1970s, independent clay animator Elliot Noyes Jr. refined the technique of freeform clay animation with his Oscar-nominated 1965 film Clay. Noyes also used stop-motion to animate sound lying on glass for his musical animated film Sandman. In 1975, filmmaker and clay animation experimenter Will Vinton joined with sculptor Bob Gardner to create an experimental film called Closed Mondays, which became the world's first stop-motion film to win an Oscar. Will Vinton followed with several other successful short film experiments, including The Great Cognito, Creation, and Rip Van Winkle, which were each nominated for Academy Awards. In 1977, Vinton made a documentary about this process and his style of animation, which he dubbed clay-mation. He titled the documentary Clay-mation. Soon after this documentary, the term was trademarked by Vinton to differentiate his team's work from others who had been, or were beginning to do, clay animation. While the word has stuck and is often used to describe clay animation and stop-motion, it remains a trademark owned currently by Leica Entertainment, Incorporated. 20 clay animation episodes featuring the clown Mr. Bill were a feature of Saturday Night Live, starting from a first appearance in February 1976. Sand-coated puppet animation was used in the Oscar-winning 1977 film The Sand Castle, produced by Dutch-Canadian animator company Heideman. Heideman was one of dozens of animators sheltered by the National Film Board of Canada, a Canadian government film arts agency that had supported animators for decades. A pioneer of refined multiple stop-motion films under the NFB banner was Norman McLaren, who brought in many other animators to create their own creatively controlled films. Notable among these are the pin-screen animation films of Jacques Trin, made with the original pin-screen donated by Alexander Alokshiev and Claire Parker. Italian stop-motion films include Quaquo, by Francesco Maiseri, which was stop-motion with origami, The Red and the Blue, and the clay animation kittens Mio and Mao. Other European productions included a stop-motion animated series of Tove Jansson's The Moomins, produced by Film Polski and Jupiter Films. One of the main British animation teams, John Hardwick and Bob Berra, were the main animators in many early British TV shows, and are famous for their work on the Trumptonshire trilogy. Disney experimented with several stop-motion techniques by hiring independent animator-director Mike Jidlov to do the first stop-motion animation of Mickey Mouse toys ever produced for a short sequence called Mouse Mania, part of a TV special commemorating Mickey Mouse's 50th anniversary called Mickey's 50th in 1978. Jidlov again produced some impressive multi-technique stop-motion animation a year later for a 1979 Disney special promoting their release of the feature film The Black Hole. Titled Major Effects, Jidlov's work stood out as the best part of the special. Jidlov released his footage the following year to 16mm film collectors as a short film titled The Wizard of Speed and Time, along with 4 of his other short multi-technique animated films, most of which eventually evolved into his own feature-length film of the same title. Effectively demonstrating almost all animation techniques, as well as how he produced them, the film was released to theaters in 1987 and to video in 1989. 1980s to present. In the 1970s and 1980s, Industrial Light and Magic often used stop-motion model animation for films such as the original Star Wars trilogy, the chess sequence in Star Wars, the Tauntauns and AT-AT Walkers in The Empire Strikes Back, and the AT-ST Walkers in Return of the Jedi were all stop-motion animation, some of it using the Go films. The many shots including the Ghosts and Raiders of the Lost Ark and the first 2 feature films in the RoboCop series use Phil Tippett's Go-motion version of stop-motion. In 1980, Mark Paul Chenoy directed the first feature-length clay animated film. A film based on the famous Pogo comic strip. Titled I Go Pogo, it was aired a few times on American cable channels, but has yet to be commercially released. Primarily clay, some characters required armatures, and walk cycles used pre-sculpted hard bases legs. Stop motion was also used for some shots of the final sequence of Terminator movie, also for the scenes of the small alien ships in Spielberg's Batteries Not Included in 1987, animated by David W. Allen. Allen's stop-motion work can also be seen in such feature films as The Crater Lake Monster, Q, The Winged Serpent, The Gate and Freaked. Allen's King Kong Volkswagen commercial from the 1970s is now legendary among model animation enthusiasts. In 1985, Will Vinton and his team released an ambitious feature film in stop motion called The Adventures of Mark Twain, based on the life and works of the famous American author. While the film may have been a little sophisticated for young audiences at the time, it got rave reviews from critics and adults in general. Vinton's team also created The Gnomes and the Gnome King for Disney's Return to Oz feature, for which they received an Academy Award nomination for special visual effects. In the 80s and early 90s, Will Vinton became very well known for his commercial work as well, with stop-motion campaigns including the California Raisins. Of note are the films of Czech filmmaker Jan Angstrom Vank Modja, which mix stop-motion and live actors. These include Alice, an adaptation of Lewis Carroll's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, and Faust, a rendition of the legend of the German scholar. The Czech school is also illustrated by the series Pattern Mat. Created by Lubomir Urbania and Vladimir Jiranek, and it was wildly popular in a number of countries. Since the general animation renaissance headlined by the likes of Who Framed Roger Rabbit and The Little Mermaid at the end of the 1980s and the beginning of the 1990s, there have been an increasing number of traditional stop-motion feature films, despite advancements with computer animation. The Nightmare Before Christmas, directed by Henry Selick and produced by Tim Burton, was one of the more widely released stop-motion features. Henry Selick also went on to direct James and the Giant Peach and Coraline, and Tim Burton went on to direct Corpse Bride and Frankenweenie. Toward the end of the 90s, Will Vinton launched the first primetime stop-motion television series called The PJs, with creator Eddie Murphy. The Emmy-winning show aired on Fox then UPN for 3 seasons. Another individual who found fame in clay animation is Nick Park, who created the characters Wallace and Gromit. In addition to a series of award-winning shorts and featurettes, he won the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature for the feature-length outing Wallace and Gromit, The Curse of the Were-Rabbit. Chicken Run, his first feature-length production, grossed over $100 million at the North American box office, and garnered critical praise. Other notable stop-motion feature films released since 1990 include Fantastic Mr. Fox and $9.99, both released in 2009, and The Secret Adventures of Tom Thumb. Variations of stop-motion, stereoscopic stop-motion. Stop-motion has very rarely been shot in stereoscopic 3D throughout film history. The first 3D stop-motion short was In Tune with Tomorrow in 1939 by John Nolling. The second stereoscopic stop-motion release was The Adventures of Sam Space in 1955 by Paul Sprunk. The third and latest stop-motion short in stereo 3D was The Incredible Invasion of the 20,000 Giant Robots from Outer Space in 2000 by Elmer Kahn and Alexander Lentjes. This is also the first ever 3D stereoscopic stop-motion and CGI short in the history of film. The first all-stop-motion 3D feature is Coraline, based on Neil Gaiman's best-selling novel and directed by Henry Selick. Another recent example is the Nintendo 3DS video software, which comes with the option for stop-motion videos. This has been released December 8, 2011 as a 3DS system update. Also, the movie Paranorman is in 3D stop-motion. Go Motion, another more complicated variation on stop-motion, is Go Motion, co-developed by Phil Tippett and first used on the films The Empire Strikes Back, Dragon Slayer, and the RoboCop films. Go Motion involved programming a computer to move parts of a model slightly during each exposure of each frame of film, combined with traditional hand manipulation of the model in between frames, to produce a more realistic motion blurring effect. Tippett also used the process extensively in his 1984 short film Prehistoric Beast, a 10 minutes long sequence depicting a herbivorous dinosaur, being chased by a carnivorous one. With new footage, Prehistoric Beast became Dinosaur. In 1985, a full-length Dinosaurs documentary hosted by Christopher Reeve. Those Phil Tippett's Go Motion tests acted as motion models for his first photorealistic use of computers to depict dinosaurs in Jurassic Park in 1993. A low-tech, manual version of this blurring technique was originally pioneered by Ladislaus Sterwich in the silent era, and was used in his feature film The Tale of the Fox. Comparison to CGI. Reasons for using stop motion instead of the more advanced CGI include the low entry price and the appeal of its distinct look. It is now mostly used in children's programming, in commercials and some comic shows such as Robot Chicken. Another merit of stop motion is that it is superior in displaying textures. This is appreciated by a number of movie makers, such as Tim Burton, who produced the puppet-animated 2005 film Corpse Bride. Stop motion in television and movies. Dominating children's TV stop-motion programming for 3 decades in America was Art Clokey's Gumby Sir as a Euro, which spawned a feature film, Gumbia in 1995, a Euro using both freeform and character clay animation. Clokey started his adventures in clay with a 1953 freeform clay short film called Gumbasia, which shortly thereafter propelled him into his more structured Gumby TV series. Beginning in the 1960s, Rankin Bass made numerous stop-motion Christmas specials such as Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, The Year Without a Santa Claus, Santa Claus is Coming to Town, among others. In November 1959, the first episode of Sandmar Currency NNCHEN was shown on East German television, a children's show that had Cold War propaganda as its primary function. New episodes, minus any propaganda, are still being produced in the now reunified Germany, making it one of the longest-running animated series in the world. In the 1960s, the French animator Serge Danot created the well-known The Magic Roundabout, which played for many years on the BBC. Another French Polish stop-motion animated series was Calagal, by Olga Pouchin and Tadeusz Wilkos. A British TV series Clangers became popular on television. The British artists Brian Cosgrove and Mark Hall produced a full-length film The Wind in the Willows and later a multi-season TV series The Wind in the Willows based on Kenneth Grahame's classic children's book of the same title. They also produced a documentary of their production techniques, Making Frog and Toad. Since the 1970s and continuing into the 21st century, Aardman Animations, a British studio, has produced short films, television series, commercials and feature films, starring plasticine characters such as Wallace and Gromit. They also produced a notable music video for Sledgehammer, a song by Peter Gabriel. During 1986 to 1991, Churchill Films produced The Mouse and the Motorcycle, Runaway Ralph, and Ralph S. Mouse for ABC Television. The shows featured stop-motion characters combined with live action, based on the books of Beverly Cleary. John Clark Matthews was animation director, with Justin Cohn, Joel Fletcher, and Gail Van der Meer providing character animation. From 1986 to 2000, over 155-minute episodes of Pingu, a Swiss children's comedy, were produced by Trickfilm Studio. In the 1990s, Trey Parker and Matt Stone made 2 shorts and the pilot of South Park almost entirely out of construction paper. In 2003, the pilot film for the series Kyo-Yukara and Friends, produced by Korean studio FFANGO Entertainment, is green-lighted into a children's animated series in 2004 after an approval with the Gyeonggi Digital Contents Agency. It was aired on KBS One on November 24, 2006 and won the 13th Korean Animation Awards in 2007 for Best Animation. FFANGO Entertainment also worked with Frontier Works in Japan to produce the 2010 film remake of Cheburashka. Since 2005, Robot Chicken has mostly utilized stop-motion animation, using custom-made action figures and other toys as principal characters. Since 2009, Leica, the stop-motion successor to Wolverton Studios, has released 2 feature films, both of which earned over $100 million at the box office. The company has committed to its 3rd film, an adaptation of the 2005 British novel Here Be Monsters, with a planned release in 2014. Stop motion in other media. A craze on the Internet is animating with clay figures on public video sites. They are often simple, bordering on free form, but effective. Some barely have a face, but the comedic or violence proportions exceeding those of conventional clay puppets, with grisly crime scenes riddled by clay gunfire and hapless victims falling in as snipers' crosshairs. The comedy helps the viewer enjoy the animation without noticing the simpleness of the clay puppet. Many younger people begin their experiments in movie making with stop motion, thanks to the ease of modern stop-motion software and online video publishing. Many new stop-motion shorts use clay animation into a new form. Singer-songwriter Oren Levy's music video for the song Her Morning Elegance was posted on YouTube on January 19, 2009. The video, directed by Levy and Yavel and Merav Nathan, uses stop-motion and has achieved great success with over 25.4 million views, also earning a 2010 Grammy Award nomination for Best Short-Form Music Video. Stop-motion has occasionally been used to create the characters for computer games, as an alternative to CGI. The Virgin Interactive Entertainment Mythos game Magic and Mayhem featured creatures built by stop-motion specialist Alan Frissell, who made the miniature figures from modeling clay and latex rubber, over armatures of wire and ball and socket joints. The models were then animated one frame at a time, and incorporated into the CGI elements of the game through digital photography. Clay Fighter for the Super Nintendo and the Neverhood for the PC are other examples. Stop-motion is a prominent production method on Vine due to its 6-second time constraint, a contemporary digital mass revival of a technique which dates back almost to the beginning to cinema itself. See also: List of stop-motion artists, List of stop-motion films, Go Motion, Still Motion, Brickfilm, Wallace and Gromit, Gumby, Time-lapse photography. References. Sources. External links: Stop-motion at DMOZ, an example for an early stop-motion film, Har Currenzinchens Soldaten, European Film Gateway U, an alternative explanation, what is stop-motion?